Good morning. So I'm delighted to be joined today by Martin Newman, and Martin is founder of the Customer First Group. Welcome, Martin.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. So Martin, you're of course one of the world's leading experts when it comes to customer experience and consumer behaviour. And Martin founded the company in 2019 based on the belief that customer centricity is paramount to success and longevity in business. So Martin, I'd like to spend the next few minutes just talking a bit about customer experience, personalisation, and some of the ideas around customer-centric transformation. So if we can take that point firstly, just to kick off, you've spoken a lot about customer-centric transformation. What do you mean exactly by that? What does it entail, and how do brands deliver that?
Sure. Well, let me give you the highlights. I mean, as a strategy and an approach, I genuinely don't think there's anything more important than being a customer-centric business. I think that has to be at the heart of everything that you do, because at the end of the day, if you are not truly customer-centric, you won't have a business in the future, because ultimately customers will go elsewhere. You know, everything really began changing in 1994 when the first transaction, you're clearly far too young to remember that, when the first transaction was conducted online. You know, because what that did is it started the democratization of retail, because up until 1994, consumers had limited choice. You had high street stores, you maybe had shopping centers and the odd catalogue to shop from. But of course, the internet changed all of that, because it meant that we now have millions, literally, of brands to choose from at our fingertips online. And as a result, I think it's become increasingly important, and consumers anyway want to have better experiences. I think we want to be served better. We want to have good levels of service. And generally speaking, we actually don't want to engage with too many brands. We like to have a relatively limited set of brands that we trust. And that's why being customer-centric is so important. The starting point to that is actually being employee-centric or employee-first. Because if you don't put your people at the heart of everything that you do, you can't expect them to do the same for your customers. So that's really the starting point. And a lot of that comes down to empowerment and enabling them to make decisions for customers that can deliver better levels of service. That might be somebody coming into the store and you can make a decision on discounting something. It could be somebody going online and you being able to resolve a customer service issue without having to go through multiple layers of stakeholders in the business to get that decision for the customer, and taking days to get that. It involves being diverse, it involves being inclusive, it involves being socially responsible, it involves having a purpose. We're going to talk a bit more about technology shortly. It certainly involves leveraging technology to deliver more joined up and better experiences across all of your channels and all of your touch points. So these are just some of the elements that are part of my framework for driving a customer-centric business and being customer first.
Brilliant. So a lot of really interesting points in there, starting with employees, talking about diversity as well. And if we think about some of the areas that you're working in and how digital technologies are empowering consumers, which is what you'll be speaking partly on at the eCommerce Expo on the 29th. What are some of these digital technologies and how are brands leveraging these specifically?
Sure. Well, I mean, you know, it could include a whole gamut of things, but just to give you some example, if you're targeting a millennial and Gen Z or Gen Z customer, you know, the younger consumer, those customers or those consumers generally these days don't want to use credit cards. They don't want debt. So they either want to be able to pay in cash, or they're using, you know, a buy now, pay later solution, which has become, you know, very prevalent in recent years. And that empowers them because it enables them to basically get what they want when they want it, even if they don't necessarily have, you know, you might be waiting to be paid in a couple of weeks' time, but it gives you access to products when you want to get them. And, you know, there's no interest. The interest is paid by the brand. So, you know, that's an example of a solution that empowers consumers. You know, other examples would be where, for example, the retailer has fully localized their proposition when they're selling into markets outside of the UK. So if you want to be relevant to customers in Germany, or you want to be relevant to customers in France, for example, you know, you need to have local language websites, you need to be offering local payment solutions, local currency. Ideally, you would have customer service in the language of those markets, you know, because again, these are very strong nationalistic countries, and you know, if we want to be relevant to them, we need to be seen to be doing what we can to behave almost like a local retailer, basically. So these are just some of the examples. Another example that would spring to mind, particularly relevant given what retailers have gone through, where they've had to close their stores, you know, over the last few months when we were in lockdown, is having a single view of stock, so that they can optimize their inventory across all the channels wherever that demand happens to be. So for example, you know, what tended to happen previously is retailers would have a separate pool of stock for the website and a separate pool of stock for the stores. It doesn't really make a lot of sense, you know. So ideally, having one stock pool and maybe even taking orders online but fulfilling it from the store, for example. So when the stores were closed during lockdown, you could have had some of your staff in there fulfilling orders for online demand, you know, just as an idea. So I think we're going to see more and more of that, and that enables retailers to make sure that they're not wasting stock and that the stock is in the place where it needs to be when consumers want to buy it. So these are just a few of the examples. Of course, mobile and mobile apps are increasingly prevalent, and because most of us these days engage digitally with a brand through mobile rather than through desktop. So that experience has to be fully optimized. It has to be a quick experience. It has to be a seamless experience. It has to be an easy, you know, path to purchase if you want to buy, because more and more of us are doing that on a mobile, again, rather than on a desktop.
Brilliant. Thanks for that snapshot. Really useful. And just to get some closing thoughts from you, what do brands need to be looking out for in the future? What's coming up on the horizon, and how can they best prepare?
Well, I think one of the big gaps that we've been talking about for a long time that we still haven't really been able to deliver or execute is personalization. You know, and that personalization has to be relevant. So what I mean by that is there's no one size fits all. I think it's being able to get into the data, understand the behavior of your most important segments of customers, and find a way of delivering a more relevant and personal experience for them. You know, let's be honest, I mean, you buy online at the moment. If I asked you the question, you know, do all the retailers that you buy from online, do they personalize the experience for you? Do they even always send you a gender relevant email? I think I probably know the answer to that, right? I can see you shaking your head. So, you know, the answer to that is no. And, you know, we're 25 years into e-commerce. I think the very least we should be able to do is be able to communicate with customers based on what they've bought previously, what they've told us they like or they don't like, you know, so capturing customers' preferences and making sure that how we communicate with them is more tailored and targeted to their needs and their desires, I think is really important. And we don't do a very good job of that at the moment. So that's certainly important. And I think obviously what COVID and the pandemic has shown us is that there's going to be a sustainable increase in digital commerce, and that's not going to drop off. You know, it's going to be at a much higher level than it was prior to the pandemic. At the moment, the percentage of retail conducted online in the UK is 28%. Prior to the pandemic, it was 19%. So it's increased 50% even since the stores have opened. And that's going to sustain itself. So that has big implications for retailers, particularly if you're multi-channel, in terms of how you resource the digital parts of your business, the skills that you look for, how you manage logistics, the technology that you implement. You know, you're going to have to put much more investment into that part of your business, because that's where a lot of the growth is going to come from in the future.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Martin. And remember that you can hear a lot more from Martin as part of the eCommerce Expo that's happening online. As I mentioned, you're taking part in a couple of sessions, so don't miss that. Thank you very much.
Possibly even 3 sessions. I think I'm
3 sessions. Apologies, 3 sessions.
And I'm moderating 2 panels, so I'm looking forward to it. It's always a good event.
Excellent. Brilliant. Martin, thank you so much. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.